Batman City of Madness, Book 3, Christian Ward writing an art on this. This is the Bat Cthulhu. Issue 2 ended effectively with the Batthulu taking the kid who he wants to be his Robin into the Under Gotham, and Batman following in with a Talon to try and get him back, which sets up what this final issue does. Which definitely goes places by the end, which it's funny, in a week where we've got Joker Year 1 playing out in Batman, it's interesting a wild thing that this tacks on to its ending, which shockingly, and maybe it's because it's like an Elseworld, I don't hate it.
I don't either, because of what it represents, what this Gotham Underneath ends up representing makes a lot of sense for the way Gotham is the way that it is, right?
So, well, yeah, I mean, but the thing we're talking about here is that we find out that this Batthulu character, the man underneath the Cthulhu, if you will, is this guy named Arthur Arkham, right? And we get some seeds early on, and at the start I didn't realize this was like real Gotham. I thought this was still in the Under Gotham. But Under Gotham was sort of created to house this guy, because he was the son of Amadeus Arkham, and the serial killer who was coming to Arkham killed his mother and sisters to basically get back at Amadeus Arkham. And he grew up just sort of like completely, messed up by this experience, by losing his family. Very Bruce Wayne, right? Very, very much in that kind of vein. And ultimately, the entity that built the Under Gotham kind of latched onto him and fed off of his grief and his pain, and effectively built a Gotham for him to exist down here as the Batman of this Gotham. And it's the idea that Batman, or a version of Batman, is so full of grief because grief drives everything that he is, that this is a Batman that he can just feed off forever. So it's feeding this cosmic style, this Cthulhu-esque entity, which has obviously lent him some tentacles for his costume.
It's very trauma-based, right?
It's all about trauma,
so he went through this entire thing, and his dad tried to help him because his dad runs Arkham Asylum, right? He created it, but nothing's working, and he basically starts trying to use says I've tried everything, every method. What else do I do? And it's almost like the trauma was driven more by the hopelessness of his father, and that's what created the Gotham Underneath. For him to act out these things. He
didn't have Alfred, right? Is kind of fundamentally what it gets to. He had this other type of character, and even just this opening scene where it's this the opening scene is actually like a caveman thing, but after that, when it's the like Amadeus talking to this serial killer patient who's coming, and there's this little moment where the killer's looking at a photo of his family and licking his lips, and it's like really disgusting. You can tell exactly what he's thinking.
Well, and he's surrounded in that page where you're introduced to that serial killer. He's surrounded by that type of that mask that we're introduced to that takes a bat form. The caveman.
It's like the red mist,
yeah. And it's very from what I associate with Lovecraft, right? This cosmic horror, this unknowable thing that roots itself in a person.
Yeah. So the main gist of this is that basically he's been down here for a while. This Gotham was built to mimic Gotham above, and he became the Batman down here to mimic the real Batman up top. And this entity effectively is like a big heart at the heart of this city. Batman comments on how he can sort of feel like a pulse or a heartbeat coming through the streets. It's like it's all connected. There's a whole sequence here as well where he fights a giant alligator or crocodile, I guess, which is meant to be this world's version of Killer Croc. And I kind of dug that as both as a fan of monster movies, but also the fact that there's a giant alligator in Resident Evil 2. It was just fun to see Batman tackle this.
And the fact when it starts talking to you is like, oh, this is just this version, because there's the hints that it's the kid, right? Where it says that this Gotham, it was almost like it was drawn by a kid, right? Like nothing really makes sense. It's not an exact copy. It's close enough.
And
so you're just like, oh, the Croc is just a kid's version of it, and then it starts talking, right? And he gets up and has two stomachs.
Yeah, although it's got a mouth in its stomach, you mean to say?
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. It's got two mouths, one in his stomach.
Yeah.
But then it starts talking to Batman. It's like, "Where's your sushi face? Because I fancied some sushi. I guess you'll do." And I was like, okay, we're gonna get some levity in this.
Yeah, I almost want to just skirt past this. The other big thing is that Batman meets this world's Two-Face, which is the Two-Face that, of course, was communicating with Harvey Dent up top,
Two-Face,
and that was a really cool sort of like tease for all this stuff. But we find out that all the villains here, like no one else here is real. They were all just created by this entity to be some kind of copy of what's up above. The person inside Cthulhu is the only real person down here. And the reason why he's brought this Robin down, whose father was killed, was because this entity wants some fresh trauma. It wants someone to feed off that's got a fresher, dark past to sort of live off. So there's some great art here where you kind of see this almost like Bat Cthulhu thing behind so Bat Cthulhu is like a Batman with Cthulhu tentacles, and we've been calling them Bat Cthulhu through the whole thing.
Yes.
But then they've got this almost, I'm going to call him Bat Barbatos Cthulhu.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is the sort of more actual cosmic entity that's more bat shaped but red and all that. So there's like panels where he's kind of behind Bat Cthulhu. It's like a sort of like double layer of like
it's a rusty nesting doll of trauma.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, because you've got Robin, you've got Batflew with his hands on his shoulders behind him, and then you've got the big cosmic Batflew behind him.
Yeah, which I wasn't expecting it to get into the actual cosmic horror, because like we've been talking about the Barbados thing in Detective Comics with Ram V, right? And the way that that's handled is completely different from this, where this feels very much like Lovecraft. This is very much madness personified.
This is very much its own take on it. This is its own thing, and but anyway, like I keep almost trying to say what happens at the end because it's really interesting to talk about. Just to sum up other things here, obviously Batman does, like, the kid doesn't choose to kill the copy of the guy that murdered his dad. Instead, he does go with Batman back up to the real world. There's a whole thing here because Talon starts fighting against Batman, but then this world's Harvey Dent ends up helping by jumping in. It's a whole thing, and Batman hugs the kid. He even takes off his cowl and shows that he's Bruce Wayne to try and help him and sort of gain his trust. But Talon's planted a bomb down here which is going to detonate the whole thing. So Batman and the kid just have to run out and escape at the last possible second. There's a big great 2-page spread with this explosion in the background as they're leaving in some sort of demented version of the Batwing. It's all very nice. What we're getting to, though, the main thing I want to talk about, and it's so interesting that I kind of like this despite everything I said about Joker Year One, is that this actually does kind of give us an interesting possible origin for the Joker. Is that at the end, it talks about how, so Arthur Arkham, this kid, right, probably when he was a bit older, was taken in by this Cthulhu and brought down here to become the Cthulhu character.
Right.
It mentions, though, that his physical body didn't come down here. It was kind of like swapped, effectively, with like a copy. They put a copy of him back up into Gotham to sort of exist. And, like, it straight up says, like, it's, I wonder whatever happened to that copy. And as we're hearing that, we start seeing, like, the Joker putting on his makeup and putting his hat on. And it's basically this idea that the Joker in this Elseworld, at the very least, is this empty shell that was created by a Cthulhu-style cosmic horror to basically just be like an empty shell to represent the kid that's been taken down there to feed on the grief, which is very interesting when you think of how the Joker is the opposite of Batman. Is that, I don't know, there's actually a very interesting thematic way of looking at this choice.
Yes, and it does the whole duality thing of the yin and the yang, right? That Batman's a little bit crazy, right, to dress up as a bat and go fight crime, right? But then Joker's almost the opposite of that, where he's almost pure madness that's dressed as a human, and it's almost like a yin and the yang is they have a little bit of each other in them, right? And so, yeah.
I think I mean, you've also got Batman like hugging Alfred during this part. That's the last page. So again, it's reaffirming how important Alfred is to like the development of who Bruce is. But I think it's the reason why I think I like this is because it still comes from this place of mystery, and while it is maybe more of a definitive origin for who the Joker is, and kind of says he's this guy named Arthur Arkham, he's not really. He's actually more of just an entity that was there to replace him. So it kind of still fulfills this idea of him being this just like he's not a person really. He's more of a, like you say, a force of nature. He is just this idea personified. So I would never really want in continuity Joker to be explained like this. As an Elseworld, I think this is a really fun thought exercise as to what the Joker is.
Well, and it just feels that whole idea of when you get to that whole cosmic horror of it all, like Joker is still unknowable, right? It is that mystery of him that makes him so interesting.
Well, I mean, what do we always say about what makes a Lovecraftian cosmic horror? Is that I think one of the ways I've heard it defined is that, and why like characters go mad when they start like getting messages from Cthulhu and stuff, is because we simply just cannot comprehend what these things are. They're beyond comprehension. So the idea that the Joker comes from something that we can't comprehend still does kind of work in a weird way.
It does, and that also is talks about grief and trauma and all of that type of stuff too, because you can try, right? Everyone handles that stuff different. And so despite the fact that there's therapists and psychologists and all that, they can help you get through it. It all comes from a place where it's kind of incomprehensible. You know,
it's probably also, I think in terms of the story and not being mad about it, I think it also comes from the fact that it is just it's a little epilogue. It's a little nice thing tacked on to the end that just gives a bit of like, hey, what if idea to the story that we just told that had nothing to do with Joker. Like this was not a Joker story at all. It's just this idea that the upside down Batman, if you want, to use the Stranger Things term, is that the upside down Batman in some ways is the Joker in a thematic sense.
Well, there's that too, and the tie to that too is like their version of Two-Face was able to communicate with our version of Two-Face because of the idea that Harvey's gone mad, right? Yeah. So it's been crawling up to Gotham in little tiny ways this whole time.
But is that also why there's no upside down version of Joker? Is because literally the guy that's inside the Bat costume is technically their Joker.
Right.
So that's very interesting, yeah.
So
because you see a few of the other villains at Arkham. You see like Ivy looks like she's dead. It looks like there's a scarecrow sitting in a cell. You get a sense that there's a lot of these other villains. Obviously, we see Croc and what demented version of him.
Yeah.
And it never occurred to me as I was reading that, are we going to see this world's version of Joker? And we never do. And the reason for it is probably because Joker is what's created when you take this person with trauma away and replace it with the empty shell. I don't know. It's very interesting as a thought piece. Again, I wouldn't necessarily want this to be the in continuity, just like straight up, here's the explanation for where Joker came from. No. But this is such an out there idea versus just, he's someone who has a dark past or someone who,
Yeah, and it is that opposite again. I keep saying that, but like where Bruce is born from it, very much real, right? From the grief of his parents. Joker's it could literally be anything, right? It's Batman's origin is clearly defined in all that, whereas Joker's doesn't have to be, right? It can be this mystery, even in this, right, where they're not quite sure that he is the shell of Arthur Arkham, and I just like that.
Yeah. It's very interesting. It's a very big swing it takes at the end, but I surprisingly didn't hate it. I kind of liked it even. So at least in an Elseworld, I thought it was a really interesting thing, and didn't just feel like there were, I don't know, because they could have marketed this. They could have said, a hot, new take on Joker's like backstory or whatever, and they never did. And the thing is that while it's only a couple of pages at the end, because they've given us so much story about Arthur Arkham and who he is and why he was sort of taken down to this place, why this entity built this fake Gotham around him. even the fake Court of Owls is like, you know, mentioned in the story, kind of like got wanted to control more, so they actually escaped into the real Gotham and all the rest of it. Like, there's so much behind all this that all of the information is already there for us to get excited and think about what this means, that this fake copy that was left instead is there. I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong, it does kind of break the rule that I almost wished is never broken, which is we do technically have a name for who Joker is. It's just that in this case, that person isn't really him anymore, you know, because he got swapped.
Well,
but
and just also, I know that Arkham was a name that Arkham Asylum came from Lovecraft.
It did, yeah.
So it's very funny that Arthur Arkham ends up being this, you know, if that is who the Joker is, it's very funny.
Isn't the name Arthur actually associated? Yeah, the new movie, it was Arthur in that, right? That was his name.
Holy crap, he was. Yeah. I forget his full name.
It wasn't Arkham, but it was Arthur something.
It was Arthur Fleck, because there was just Affleck jokes. Yeah. Oh man. Good pull on that one. You remember that, where I try to forget that movie as much as I can.
I didn't until that moment. It just popped out in my head. I was like, wait, isn't Arthur also related to Joker as well? It is for that movie, at least. I don't know if it came from anywhere before that.
Yeah, so, but yeah, just, man, Christian Ward executing this on a high level, because I was like, how are they going to wrap these threads up? And then once it started getting into the Talon fight, and I was like, okay, this is kind of typical. But then once we got to the whole idea of trauma and grief and that driving Arthur and then becoming the Batman of that world, you know, because of all of this, but he didn't have an Alfred. He didn't have that guiding force. It was just the trauma in full control, you know, and how does it, you know, how does it keep going is, well, you just traumatize somebody else. So it's also this thing about generational trauma being passed down as well. And it's just like, I wasn't expecting that in a Bat Cthulhu book, right? Like, so yeah, man, Ward's really handling. I look forward to see what he's working on next.
Yeah, that's like, I got super interested in this by the end of the first issue, and I feel like the ending here kind of hit me with something that I can never have seen coming. And I think it's because it was just not predictable, because it didn't introduce the idea of this character until the third issue, so we couldn't have predicted it anyway. But
right.
I think this is such an interesting swing, and it's a big swing, but it's so out of a left field, to use a term, that it doesn't feel like it betrays what the book already set up, but it does sort of like immediately make you think about the larger implications of what it just kind of throws out here at the end. And like I say, as an Elseworld, as a thought exercise of like, hey, what if Joker is just like a body that came from Cthulhu? He is just this empty vessel of chaos kind of thing. And maybe the reason why he's so obsessed with Batman in some capacity is that because he's a copy or a duplicate without the soul of someone who had a similar tragedy or something. I don't know. There's something in there that is quite interesting. As much as I hate when writers try and connect them thematically beyond just like what they mean to each other in the present sense, this at least was a cool reveal, and like I don't need it to ever come back. That said, though, if he says, hey, they've let me do a sequel and I'm going to explore like more of this, then I wouldn't be against it either. I'd be curious to see what he has. But
like the madness comes to Gotham type thing.
But yeah, interesting. You know what, like I think on paper, if you told me this before I read it, I'd have said that sounds shit. Having actually read it, the execution does actually go a long way to make me go, you know what? I'm actually kind of into this. So
you know, something like that definitely made me want to go recheck out the John Carpenter movie Prince of Darkness again, because there's some similar themes about, you know, madness and trauma and that happen in that movie as well. So you know, but yeah, no, this is very, very, very well done.
Yeah, and obviously, I don't know if we've emphasized the art enough at this point, but some of it is just absolutely stunning. Yeah. You've got all this. I mean, most of the issue takes place in the under Gotham, and just the various versions of like the evil spreading, the heartbeat. You know, we see it looks like a giant heart at one point when you see this Cthulhu entity, whatever it is, and then, as I said, that early stuff where it's the real world of the history of Arthur Arcane, or Arkham's not Arcane. Arthur
I was
Arkham.
Say it was Arthur Arcane, man.
Sorry,
It's
the
a
word
new character.
arcane's like dark magic. That
Yeah.
kind of fits.
It does fit. Like I'm just saying, like
Yeah.
who was this character I missed? But I just gotta say, yeah, it was this in the Aquaman book. Ward's coloring, he just has a touch that I haven't seen in very many other artists. Just like all of the pinks and greens and like colors that I don't normally associate with each other. He makes them all work in the Under Gotham.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, the only way I can describe this ending working for me is that it's just not an idea I could have ever predicted to try and do, that it just hit the right note of surprise plus like interest. Whereas almost anything else you could do to try and explain who Joker is will just make me roll my eyes. This was at least like, oh well, this is definitely an idea. Like you've definitely put some thought into this.
Like you said, it's an epilogue. It's not the main point.
Yeah.
So that goes a long way too. That he's like, hey, what about this? You know, as a time to make you think. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. What were you rating City of Madness issue 3?
I'm gonna give this a 9.
I agree with that. It's super interesting. It was for a double-sized issue, 50 pages or whatever it is, it was a very quick, easy read as well.
Yeah. For sure.
Super cool.